Morning, members. Brad, I think we have everybody live now.
Yes.
Yep, we're good to go.
Morning. Great. Once again, it did feel like the panel members were talking to ourselves for the last few minutes, so that's a bit of comic relief for ourselves before we start. But again, everyone is welcome just to use the chat box to say a hi and share from which region they are dialing in from all over the country. Great. So as it's 5 minutes past 9:30, I think we should actually start our magic. So for existing members, hi, it's me again. For any new members whose first FIA national webinar this will be, welcome. My name is Brad, and I'm the FIA's Regulatory and Compliance Specialist. The FIA Transformation Executive Committee, or EXCO as we term it, is super excited to present our 2025 webinar, where we really assembled insurance industry heavyweights who, much like your comprehensive policies, will cover absolutely everything. Under the theme, reimagining the sustainability of the insurance broking industry, this morning's session really seeks to tackle pressing challenges, including our aging workforce, regulatory influences, spoiler, there are few, and skills transfer. Basically, what I mean by that is teaching Gen Z what fax machine means. A bit of housekeeping before we kick off. A reminder to participants to please keep cameras and mics off. The chat box will soon be closed, and we kindly ask that any questions you may have for today's panel be submitted via the Q&A options in the Teams platform. Towards the end, we shall attempt to answer any questions, and if we do not get to your question in time, we will most certainly respond to you after the session. With respect to CPD, due to the format of this morning's webinar, we'll be applying for CPD accreditation post the event. So confirmation of that CPD will be provided to FIA members in due course via our AC developed platform. So enough of me. I will now hand over to Ms. Zanele Dintwa, the people lead at Aon South Africa and Aon Mauritius, as well as a member of the FIA Transformation Exco, who, as our moderator for this morning, will just help shape and set the scene for the session. Over to you, Zanele.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and good morning to our panelists as well. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I think it's going to be quite a spirited one. So as Brad has already set the scene, we are trying to reimagine the sustainability of the insurance broking industry by having a conversation with stakeholders that influence decisions in the industry. The sustainability of the insurance broking industry is intricately linked to its ability to attract and retain talent. As the industry grapples with talent gaps in the growing younger demographics, this challenge is compounded by an aging workforce that continues to exit the industry. The evolving needs of policyholders require innovative solutions, yet the talent gap threatens to stifle growth and creativity. So addressing the root causes of all these issues is crucial for us to ensure the long-term viability of the industry. So in reflecting and in preparing for this discussion, I've picked up a number of some statistics that I want to share just to set the scene in terms of what our industry looks like. To start, this is from the INSETA annual report, and it's really companies that have submitted their annual WSP data. Quite consciously aware that not everybody has done this, but this gives us a feel in terms of definitely the age demographic of our workforce in insurance. The graph shows that there's a dominating younger workforce with a decreasing aging workforce, immediately signaling a high rate of, you can call it brain drain or skills transfer gap in the mainstream. If we look at the next one, this one is also, I picked up from the same report, and it is an interesting stat to look at around the mismatch of skills and study to roles and responsibilities in the industry. 30% of people working in our industry are other qualified, so meaning that they've studied in other fields besides insurance, but that's okay. 35% are deemed to be underqualified for the roles that they are in, meaning they do not have the requisite qualifications. So that is an interesting and possibly concerning stat. 25%, on the other hand, are deemed to be overqualified for the roles that they are in, meaning that they have higher qualifications than what is required for the roles. So these are some facts that we are going to delve deep into as we discuss this topic going forward. The next set of stats really shows the top 5 hard to fill vacancies that we see, with 108 insurance brokers saying that the insurance broker role is the most hardest to fill. And that to me speaks to a supply and demand issue. And it certainly highlights the fact that there is definitely a shortage in our industry. I think also what was interesting is looking at stats, not from this report, but from a report a few years back, is that while in the industry we do a lot of learnerships, the absorption rate is at about 30%. So I think that is quite an interesting stat. The panel discussion for today aims to delve into these topics from various perspectives, including from a corporate perspective, from a small to medium business perspective, from professional industry bodies, as well as regulators, all offering valuable insights and actionable recommendations for all the members that are on the call today. So that's really just to set the scene. In terms of our panel, we've got Thokozile Mahlangu. Thokozile is the CEO of the Insurance Institute of South Africa. She's got 25 years of experience in the industry. She's a groundbreaking business leader and has delivered various skills development programs over the years. Thokozile is also known for her commitment to social responsibility and sustainability. So definitely a stakeholder that we want as part of this conversation. So hi, Thokozile, if the members can see you there. There you are. Okay, perfect. And then introducing our next, good morning. Our next panelist is Simon Coleman. Simon is the CEO of the Liability Company. Simon is a seasoned professional with well over 30 years in the industry. He is passionate about building diverse talent in workspaces and was the winner of the Inclusive Leader Award from the Accenture Business Engage Mainstreaming Awards of 2021. Congrats on that. He also, as you will recognize him from The Insurance Apprentice, where he's our resident head judge on the show. So Simon, welcome to you.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
Thanks. Okay, next on the panel, we've got Tara Davidson. Tara is a seasoned executive and human capital leader at Marsh in South Africa, overseeing operations across 9 African countries. With over 23 years experience in the financial sector, she has a robust background in HR, in compliance, in the financial services industry, and was the COO for JLT South Africa, amongst other roles. Tara, welcome.
Morning. Thanks so much.
Morning. Good morning. And then we've got Kersha Singh. Kersha is the head of policy support at the FSCA, which is the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, within the Regulatory Policy Division. Her portfolio involves driving the FSCA's objectives of financial inclusion and transformation of the South African financial sector and the development of the FSCA approach to sustainable finance. Welcome, Kersha.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Okay, last but not least, we've got Snowy. Where are you, Snowy? If you can put on your cap. Why do I not see Snowy?
I'm there. Maybe at the bottom, but I'm there.
Are you there? Okay, so we've got Snowy Mahlangu. There you are. I can see you now. Snowy is an engaging, authentic, and passionate HR leader with deep expertise in learning and development, talent management, leadership development, executive coaching, as well as diversity and inclusion. With over 25 years of experience working across multiple industries, she has driven global brands through transformation with a clear focus on strategy execution. She currently serves as the Talent Learning Inclusion Lead for India, Middle East, and Africa for Marsh. So welcome. Snowy. All right, so we're going to go straight into the discussion. I think, and this is a question to everyone, right? As we set the scene for this discussion, what What do you think are the most significant sustainability challenges facing the insurance industry today? If I can start with you, Simon.
Sure, thanks, Zanele. I hate to start off any conversation mentioning AI because I think we're all a little bit jaded. Every conference you go to, that's always top of the list. But I think it would be remiss of us not to think about it, especially in the context of, as you put it earlier, we've got aging expertise and a lot of younger people coming through that might not necessarily have access to those people. I think AI presents a threat as well as an opportunity. So, how do we use the technology to make sure we can upskill people faster? And how do we get the people that know stuff to use it so that it can know more stuff?
Exactly. Thanks for that. AI as a threat and an opportunity. I think let's focus on the opportunity aspect to lessen the threat aspect. Thank you for that. Thokozile.
Thank you, Zanet, and good morning once more. Thank you for having me in this webinar. I've just summed the key challenges to four, one being what I call the demographic shifts and the aging workforce that you alluded to as you were speaking. For me, that highlights a big gap that we are not addressing. If we look at the age split that the age demographics that you reflected on the screen, there is the younger people, let's say 40 and below, and then there's the mature generation, say 40 and plus. And the gap in between is the question I ask, what are we doing about it? The second one is what I call skills mismatch and shortage. And that for me is beyond the qualification. So the qualification versus the practical experience gap. The tangible experience. We all come into the industry with some qualification, whether it be a certificate, a degree, honors, up to masters, but the practical experience is what is needed in the industry. We need work-ready individuals, and without that, we are skilled, but application is something we still need. And I don't want to talk about solutions at this point, but I just want to pose to you what I see as challenges. In addition to that, one of the things you spoke about when you were doing the introduction is the 30% of lack of absorption of the learnerships that we embark on. And the question I ask there, why? Why is there that lack of absorption? And a response I also then put to that is, is maybe the skilling that we provide those learners, are we skilling them with the right skills that we actually need, or are we skilling them for the sake of compliance? One of the challenges I always struggle with is us investing in NQF level 4s that we get these young people to embark on, yet we don't have any job profiles that require an individual to have an NQF level 4. So we are contributing towards that lack of absorption or skilled unemployed people. Third one is what I call limited career awareness amongst young people. I'm one of those people who joined the industry without being aware that I could pursue a career in insurance, like many of us. So there is a need for us to intentionally create the awareness of the insurance profession amongst young people. And lastly is what I call regulatory pressures. And I think over the years, there's been a big drive, correctly so, for regulatory examination and that. But in that process, I think we missed the need for technical skills, the need to drive technical skills. And I believe that the two need to be married. One needs to have the regulatory compliance, but you cannot separate or do away with the insurance technical knowledge, the practice of insurance that we all need to be able to practice effectively in the insurance industry. I'll pause there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've set the scene for the rest of the discussion, actually, because we're going to come back to those points and unpack them. So natural progression, particularly with your last point around regulatory, I'm keen to hear, Kersha, your views around sustainability challenges in our industry.
Thanks, and good morning again to everybody. I think from a regulator perspective, maybe bringing in a little bit of a different lens to the conversation. The topic of sustainability, I think, is very often linked with challenges such as climate change and the massive impact that's going to have on our economies and all our industries, including those in the financial sector. From an insurance perspective specifically, we look at things like emerging insurance protection gaps, how the sector and the private and public sectors can work together to address this. And I think what that translates into is a need for quite different skills in the industry as well. So, considerations for how are ESG risks factored into things like your underwriting, your investment policies, your governance frameworks. One key example I'd like to give is the FSCA last year published a statement on consumer vulnerability. And I think there's a range of ways that consumers in this evolving landscape can be made vulnerable. And I think, the skills to be able to respond to that effectively and appropriately is certainly something that needs to be developed. So I think very much being able to respond to a very dynamic and evolving sector and international context of challenges like climate change, where it's not a single country that can address it. It really depends on collective efforts towards a broader goal. And then not losing sight of what the impact is on the end customer at the end of the day. And are our businesses appropriately responding to what those impacts are, particularly from an insurance perspective, and making sure people remain protected against emerging risks. So that for me is what kind of keeps me up at night from a sustainability perspective. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Right. And the discussion around people and talent and skill must always be looked at in terms of, what are the emerging risks? How are the policy holders, needs changing, and how can we best provide the right advice, provide the right products and solutions and innovation to deal with these emerging risks. Thank you very much for that contribution, Krisha. Snowy, your take.
So I think in pockets it was touching, but I think for me, and it's more an opportunity that the industry could look at, is really the partnership between industry and institutions. There's a gap, because what I find is that we should have more conversations with institutions and say, this is how we would like you to get individuals ready for the industry. But I think there's a gap. We have not looked at that. I know for engineers and all that, there used to be the industry and institution connection. So there's an opportunity to create a forum for that, so that we really build around what is needed, because so much has changed from what we had 20 years ago to where we are now. And I think it's about the mind shift change. If you look at the stats of all the young people that are most probably there, but they stay there, and they grow old in those roles. So really there's work that we need to do, and there's an opportunity to expand knowledge overall for the industry. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I'll take that as a challenge also for us at the FIA, Brad, to see how we assist with that. Thank you, Snowy. Tara.
Thanks so much, Zanele. I think, the panel members have touched on a number of great areas. It's across the industry. From my point of view, I believe that obviously the skills gap between people who have many years of experience, practical on the ground, versus the learned technical, qualification experience is an opportunity for us. It's a negative, but it's a positive as well. And we need to leverage where we can to bridge that skills gap and the skills transfer gap.
And then the other item that I've seen, particularly in our organization, and I believe it stems across the country, is the exit of skills from our country. And that may be due to other opportunities from a global perspective, but also may stem from socio-economic, our economic environment. So that is a challenge in a way, but I also think there's an opportunity, because if more skilled people are leaving our country, that gives opportunity for younger people to step into those roles. So I do believe it creates an opportunity in itself. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tara. And you're quite right. And working for a multinational where, a value proposition for our colleagues is international exposure, we experience, immigration of skill quite a bit. But on the other hand, there's also an opportunity, as many people are actually returning back to South Africa. And so I think, it's a matter of how do we leverage. And then today we are living in a remote working is there, remote transfer of skill is there. So where you are located geographically across the globe should not really be, in theory, should not really be a barrier. But we do know that there are really barriers that are contributing to the skills shortage, the talent gaps, etc. So if I'm going to focus on the people and talent aspect, what are these barriers? What are the primary barriers that are contributing to this? Thokozile, you spoke about the fact that we are investing a lot in terms of qualifications, and I can attest to that. All the NQF from the 4s, 5s, 6, all the way. We are investing quite a bit in that, and yet we still have this narrative of a skills shortage. So what is actually the barrier here? If I can come back to you, Thokozile, on that, and I'm going to ask Simon and Tara to comment on that particular one as well. Thokozile?
Oh, I thought you wanted to go to Simon and Tara first. That's all right. Sorry, my apologies. So, an overarching response I can give to you is what I highlighted, the lack of the practical experience or practical training. I do feel that we're at a point where there needs to be a bigger drive for occupational qualifications or introduction of apprenticeship onto the NQF 5, 6, up to 7, perhaps. So that the requirement of experience is a barrier. Yes, it is great. We all want experienced people. We want people to come in, hit the ground running, but that on its own also provides a challenge. So there's a need for us to have the intentional approach to take the inexperienced individuals and upskill them. It does require time, it does require money, it does require a slightly different focus onto businesses. The shareholder benefits may be compromised for a little bit of time, but it does require repositioning, I believe. So the requirement of experience is one barrier. The other barrier is the lack of clear structured succession planning. We spoke about the mature generation with truckloads of critical technical knowledge that are retiring, and they retire with that knowledge. But we need to have a structured succession planning so that when they do retire, that knowledge is retained in the industry, or that skill is at least retained in the industry. The other challenge linked to the aging workforce is the re-employment of retired people. Re-employment not with the focus of transferring the skills, but re-employment to continue the way we were. So we need to also find a repositioning approach. I feel that towards the latter years of one's career in insurance, we need to have a structured approach where there is intentional skills transfer, right? And then look, the remote working or the hybrid working has got its pros and cons. I do feel that we are missing out quite a lot on those, printer sessions or coffee sessions, or just as you walk towards a person's desk and just ask for clarity or need support. That in contact support of, I've got this policy I'm underwriting, I'm stuck here and there. Those instant conversations, yes, I appreciate that it can be done virtually, but there is an element that I feel the experience I had when I joined the industry, and that opportunity of having the in-person, walking towards a person's desk or my boss's desk and having that guidance, we don't have that anymore, or we have it in a different fashion. And then the other barrier is perhaps the intentional approach of creating that pool of skilled professionals that can then feed into the future leaders or the future insurance professionals. Thank you.
So that's quite a lot of barriers, and hopefully we can unpack some. So as you were talking, Simon, you've got your hand up, and I'm hoping you're going to possibly even challenge some of the comments. Please go for it.
No, thanks, Zanele, and thanks Thokozile for that. I could relate to everything that you were saying, but some things kind of I wouldn't say annoyed me, but they reminded me of certain things that exist in the world at the moment that we don't seem to have acknowledged, and this is not particular to South Africa. But you spoke about retired people coming back into the workforce, and the retirement age is really set by the pension and provident fund sector, if you think about it. It doesn't really have a hell of a lot to do with one's ability to continue to do the job. So, I think it's one thing in a corporate to say, look, you can't be on the workforce anymore because you've hit retirement age. And then the company, I agree, should be kind of filling the pipeline up with people that can be mentored by that individual, either before they leave or for a period of time afterwards. But I think, as you'll find, even in the medical fraternity, it's not unusual to have an obstetrician, just to use one example, who's way into their 70s. And they are self-employed, which means they've never had any pressure kind of put upon them in terms of when they should hang up their stethoscope, so to speak. And I think this applies in our industry. And I speak from experience here. I'm 53. And I've got a very small team of 9 people. We're still very much, I guess you could say, we're in startup phase. But half of my team is post-corporate retirement age. And our motto in the business is we're combining traditional wisdom with fearless innovation, which means we're investing in AI, but at the same time, we're relying on the lived experience of underwriters who've been in the industry for some more than 40 years. So, and that kind of, so aside from the issue around, I think, kind of making way for people without really acknowledging that the people that are in those roles still have a lot of value to add and might still have another 10 to 15 years in them of productivity. Aside from that, if I shift into the sort of SME sector, this is where, and I've, Zanele and I were on a similar talk towards the end of last year. And I find often when I attend these functions, we come at them very much from a corporate perspective, where you do have the retirement age as it is a real thing that actually exists. And you have a lot of resources so that you can train up a whole group of people before they actually hit the underwriting room or the broking floor, whatever you want to call it. But in the SME space, like where I operate and where I think a lot of the FIA members operate, sometimes you can't even have an inexperienced person in your team, A, because you might not be able to afford it, but B, because you don't have your other team members, let's just say you're a team of 5, also don't have the time to do the training. So what we end up doing is employing people that have lots of experience in the SME sector. Of course, I'm speaking for myself here. I'm not assuming that everyone does it like this. And it doesn't really sit right with me, to be honest, because I feel like I should be employing younger people and training them up. But I just don't have the capabilities right now. And it's one of the things that I'm hoping I'll get some insights on, listening to the rest of the panel, because I'm not saying it's hopeless. It's definitely not. There's a way that we can work together here. But I do think we must acknowledge that the SME challenges are slightly different. In fact, maybe not slightly, they're very different to what we have in the corporate space.
Thanks, Simon. So maybe if we go back to the issue around retirement in South Africa, we do have that backdrop of youth unemployment. And in my head, I always say, we need to find a way to balance the two. And I agree, the retirement ages, the 60, 65, people firstly can't afford to retire comfortably at that age. So people want to continue to contribute towards their retirement savings. And also on the flip side, the longer we keep people in the workforce, then the less opportunities that we have to bring up younger people into the workspace. So there has to be a solution that provides a win-win, so to speak, right? Precisely because we need the relationships and the skill of the age the workforce that is aging, and yet we need to create opportunities and learning for the younger people. So there must be a way somehow, and I think the minds in this room will be able to come up with industry solutions, because this is not it's not necessarily a corporate or SME solution. It has to be an industry view, and it's the partnerships, I think, that were spoken about earlier, to say how do we leverage the different players to come up with these solutions. So I think we'll be visiting that as well. I also wanted to latch on to the issue around SME and affordability or capability. Again, it leads us to the issue of partnerships with the bigger global brokers. How do we use things like, enterprise development, skills development? How do we use all of that to be able to benefit the industry as a whole, for the larger corporates as well as the small to medium businesses? Very good contribution there. Thank you very much. Tara, your take?
So I think Thokozile and Simon have touched on the main pain points that the entire industry is facing. And Simon, whilst you have a very unique environment that may be applicable to a number of other smaller enterprises, I don't think it's dissimilar to corporates. The advent of remote working, and I'm not proposing that people come back into office full time. I think, there's a number of progressions that have been made that have been extremely positive with remote and hybrid working. However, I do think that has also changed the landscape, even in corporates, where in prior years, people would sit around at their desks, they would speak about a specific claim, a specific event, and in doing so, that skills transfer would take place. Now we're in a situation where we're setting up meetings to discuss very specific topics. So it's not only in a small environment like you are in, but in the corporate environment, I think that skills transfer has reduced significantly, obviously due to a number of events that have happened. And also when you look at the skill that somebody who has spent 30 to 40 years in the market, it's going to take that amount of time for a younger person to learn those skills. And we need to, as Zanele has indicated, we need to try and find a way, and I'm sure we can come up with solutions. I've got a couple of ideas, and I know we're going to touch on that a bit later. But how can we leverage that skill set, that massive IP and intelligence that's available in our industry, to make sure that we're giving our young people that opportunity to step up, because that's how they progress through the workforce. that is how somebody who was a graduate 10 years ago, in 3 years' time, becomes the CEO of a corporate. It's not an impossibility. I believe that is a reality that we can make happen in our environment, but it also means that we have to spend time in investing in the actual skills transfer, whether it's job shadowing, mentoring. However we come up with a solution, I believe there is an opportunity here for us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tara, for that. So I think what I am hearing, and for any real change to be effected, you need the willingness and you need the ability. So the willingness, I think I'm hearing it. In terms of ability, I'm going to pivot to you, Kersha. The regulatory backdrop can be a very effective enabler for certain things, right? And particularly if we are talking about sustainability challenges facing our industry regarding, the skills shortage and the aging workforce and everything that we've spoken about, do you see any opportunity for the regulatory framework to enable the industry with these challenges, if at all?
Sorry, I'm laughing because we were speaking earlier about dogs barking, and as you asked me, my dog stopped barking.
Couldn't hear them.
Okay, thank you. That's good. So the role of regulation, and on this topic in particular, what I wanted to speak about is the FSCA's intention to strengthen its role in relation to transformation of the financial sector. So we've published our transformation strategy. Colleagues may be familiar with it. Basically, with the forthcoming Conduct of Financial Institutions Bill, the COFI Bill, the FSCA is going to be given a stronger mandate in relation to transformation. And how we see that playing out practically is we know companies in South Africa have commitments to meet in terms of the BEE Act and in our sector in terms of the Financial Sector Code. But there's been challenges with that. And what we'd like to have engagements on is how to strengthen adherence to that code. Now, one of the elements of the code is absolutely skills development. And we would like to have engagements, not just in the insurance industry, across all financial institutions on what are the challenges in relation to meeting their targets, including on skills development. I think the regulator getting involved in this space can catalyze two things. Number one is improved data collection. Zanele, when you were speaking at the beginning of the session, you mentioned the data that is available is just from entities that did submit that information. And we see a big challenge with information submission on the transformation side of things. So getting more accurate information, including on things like skills development, where resources are being spent, what the challenges may be. And then I think the second good or catalytic role that the regulator can play is this coordination of efforts. So if we're engaging and we see 3 different insurance companies are experiencing the same challenges when it comes to skills development, is there a way that we can start this industry conversation as some of my other panelists have been saying? Where can we be working collectively to address these sorts of challenges, and how do we? I mean, sometimes regulation is spoken of as a burden, and I completely acknowledge that there is the potential for that, but there is also the ability to say, hey, we're all expected to comply with this. Can we think of more innovative and resourceful ways of combining our collective obligations to meeting industry goals? So that's something that I think I'm quite excited by in relation to the future role of the FSCA. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and very insightful. And I'm definitely of the view that, and agree with you around, the regulation being a catalyst towards, some of the transformation goals. And particularly you spoke about the BEE codes and the skills development obligations that are put on companies. So maybe if we can just expand on that, and I'm gonna come to you, Snowy. One of the pillars of the skills development element of BEE is learnerships and internships, as you know, which is linked to the number of people that you've got in your organizations as a target, and we take them through the programs. But as already identified earlier, there's an absorption issue in the industry. So can we talk about that a little bit? Are we doing this just to comply and tick a box for our BEE accreditation? What does reimagining this really look like for real impact over and above, the requirements from a BEE perspective?
Thanks, Zanele. I mean, for me, this is interesting. I mean, when you did your introduction, you had a slide on how to fill vacancy. I'm like, if we have so many young people that are employed and we have hard to fill, what is the gap, right? It really it boggles my mind that we are saying we have all these people and yet none of them can fill these gaps. It just doesn't make sense, right? So it really means that from an industry perspective, we're not deliberate, right? And I know it might not be a popular comment, but I will make this comment now, is that when you look at the stats that you show, the entry level at the young ages are quite high. And then when you look at the ages, right, and I could imagine, and I mean, we don't necessarily have the stats, those young people are in your early career stages, is how long are we taking for one person to move from one role to the next, the progression. So I see that as a barrier as well, for the absorption, because if we move people along, it will help with that absorption. So I think when we talk around from a talent perspective, how deliberate are we in terms of we bringing them in, we developing them, and yet when we get in, it takes me 10 years to move to the next level. And I'm saying if we did that 10 years ago, we should not be doing the same things. Something has to change. There has to be the shift in that. So for me, that is one of the big thing. I mean, many years ago when I joined the industry, I come from a telco environment, and I joined this industry. One of the leaders I had a conversation with, like, we have all these learners and interns. Why can't we just break it down into a morning shift and a night shift? If we are talking working from a global environment, and if our partnerships are in the US or whatever, why can't we break it down so that we do accommodate? So for me is really around the industry. They have to open out their minds around. We have AI that is really driving us to change how we do things, but we as a collective need to think, what is it that we can do differently within the organizations that we run? It can't be the same of the same of the same, because maybe we did things many years, it worked then, but it's definitely not going to work for us now. So for me, that is one of the things. And then maybe the last thing that I want to say, and I know Simon touched on it when we talk about SMEs. I mean, as an industry, we develop so many interns and learners. My sense is that because you're a small business, we need to start talking around, we've developed them for you so that the industry still gets them, right? So we say, Simon, your workforce, they at a certain age, how do we find a way of making sure that they partner, and we find a way for them to partner with that? Because I think for me, and I see it's a big thing that is missing, is the knowledge library. It's not necessarily skills that is missing. It's that knowledge library, that these are some of the things that are missing. And maybe the last point that I want to make before Thokozile, is from a triple B perspective, and I know I work with it. It depends on where you are. It could be for compliance sake, because we play the system. But I think it's how as industry we have conversations, because we've got so many problems. We've got interns and learners, we've got the TVET colleges, which nobody looks at because maybe they're not good enough, and those industries are not even looked at because we say it's inferior qualifications. We as an industry have work to do. We really need to look at this is what we have. We need to work with what we have. And for me, that is my view. And maybe just the last thing is that how we do mentoring and coaching, we need to upskill our managers to be able to mentor and coach these youngsters, and so that they're able to build on the skills and knowledge that is missing. Thank you.
Thank you. And park that last thought. We're gonna come back and revisit that. But you're quite right. So the numbers also don't make sense. We've got hard to fill vacancies, and yet we've got all these people that we are not absorbing. Something is not making sense. Simon, do you want to explain this for us?
Well, before we do that, I mean, I just wanted to go back to, I love what Snowy said, and I know we'd had a chat about it some time ago, you know, about the corporate arena kind of very much acting as a training ground for the rest of the industry. Because in fact, without even doing it consciously, that's how it always has been. You know, when I started in insurance in the 90s, it was known that, you know, your training grounds were your Santums, your Mutual and Federals, commercial union. That is where people kind of cut their teeth, so to speak, to get to understand, you know, the basics of insurance. And then they would move on into setting up their own brokerages or joining other smaller businesses. It's not as easy as one might think. I would really like to see us having more conversation about this, and maybe there should be an industry gathering or something arranged by the FIA just to explore it. Because, you know, accessing people who have had some degree of training is one issue. Affording, you know, being able to pay them is of course another. And as we were talking about earlier with the SME sector, you know, you often as a SME, you're a lot closer to the survival line than you are to the extreme profit line. So you have to deploy your resources wisely. And also it's not always useful to have somebody who's kind of being rotated into different businesses, because there's all sorts of confidentiality issues. You know, brokers certainly don't want their competitors having a good look at their client list because someone who was with them for 3 months is now working somewhere else. And it's the same in my space. I mean, we're a specialist UMA, and there's very limited employers in our space. So we also, you know, when you get someone in, you really want to keep them if you can. But I like the idea. I really like the idea that somebody's kind of filling the pipeline and then releasing the output into the rest of the market for us to kind of pick up. Maybe that needs to be more formalized or structured in some way. Snowy, I think we really need to get together and talk more about this. I like the idea.
Okay, thanks. I think another possible action point for the FIA in terms of how do we help to facilitate that partnership between your corporates and your SME, exactly to the points that you've raised. Thokozile?
Thank you, Madam. A lot of what has been said by Snowy and Simon, I concur with. And I also just want to add and say, you know, I want to look at a reimagining element of this. I think we are at a point where we need to start upskilling for sustainability and be cautious of upskilling, let me say, young people with the NQF level 4. NQF level 4 is an equivalent of a matric qualification. So if a person is coming into the industry, they already have an NQF level 4, yet you want to upskill them with another NQF level 4. we are our own enemy where we are causing that barrier for progression. So from a reimagining perspective, I would suggest upskilling for sustainability, starting with an NQF level 5. NQF level 4, if a person does not have a metric certificate, fine. I saw a comment in the chat as well that spoke about other qualifications relevant for the industry. So there are different approaches into education. There's the Council of Higher Education approach, which looks at universities. That gives you theoretical knowledge. But then there's the QCTO approach, which looks at occupational qualifications. And we are designing, as a professional body, we are designing qualifications, occupational qualifications, to make sure that they give one the practical experience. An occupational qualification requires you to have practical as well as theoretical experience for you to actually have the certificate. So that's what we are driving for. With the universities, what we are driving for is to include a lot of practical elements into the degree, things like having guest lectures, but also case studies, and that is work in progress. And with the there's legislative requirements from an education perspective that we have to be mindful of as well. There can be an overhaul of the qualification, but there can be adjustments to it up to a certain percentage. But that is work in progress, and that is something happening. However, we got to say, what are we going to do now? And for me, the now is, as we were talking, I was reminded of a friend of the industry and a personal friend of mine, Ben Tonkin, and may his soul rest in peace. I learned a lot from him. Ben Tonkin was intentional about transferring skills. He was intentional about sitting down with a person. He could spend the whole week with you, just teaching you the practice of insurance. And that's what we need to get back to. Yes, we speak about the aging workforce. There is a need, a different need we have for the retiring people. And there's what I call a phased approach to retirement. As I said at the beginning, as we near the retirement age, I mean, Simon mentioned 50, 53, I'm close to 50, but we now got to be intentional on what legacy are we leaving? And we're going to be happy to be called back into practice after we've retired to actually work. We should be called back to transfer the skills. In fact, that intentional approach to transferring skills needs to happen while we are still here. Our job profiles need to take a different approach into that. And I'm talking beyond mentoring and coaching. I'm talking vocational training. And South Africa does not have to do anything different, or the insurance industry does not have to do anything different. There are initiatives globally that have been tried, tested, and are working. I'm thinking of what's happening in Singapore. There is a skills future initiative that's been working, and we can learn for that. There is an initiative in Germany where there's an intentional apprenticeship and vocational training where one comes into the industry with a qualification, but the first thing you do is to go through a vocational training where it gives you practical training. So there are lessons we can take from a global best practice and bring into the environment. The key thing is for us to just do, and not just to talk, but to actually do. When next year this time we're talking, we should be able to say, even if it's 5 that we would have done, we need to be able to say, here it is, and stop talking about the problem. We know the problem, we know the solutions. We now need to implement. And for me, that's the reimagining. We've got to get to a point where we are implementing. I did touch on the challenges of the hybrid work environment or work from anywhere. There is also an opportunity from a reimagining perspective there. We can take advantage of the generative AI in the training and take advantage of gamified learning. And with that, for me, comes the leadership element. The traditional leadership is not going to take us into the future. We got to be aware that we are now leading much younger people than us, and those people are learning differently. We got to appreciate their approach of learning and be able to still impart our knowledge in a way that they will understand and still be fitting to the industry. I do feel that we need an industry-wide approach into this. It cannot be pockets where it's done by different companies. For us to have an impact, it's got to be an industry approach. And the other element of reimagining for sustainability for me is us having to understand the customer needs, understanding the behavior of the customer, how they consume content, how they consume marketing content, and also take into account that as much as we have younger workforces, we also have younger consumers or younger customers, and we got to be able to design products that are catering for that generation and the solutions that are catering for that generation. Snowy and Simon spoke about the collaboration. There's got to be that intentional collaboration, and I'm thinking of shared training programs here. I'm thinking of organizations that probably have bigger financial muscles to be able to take a pool of people that they've trained and say, here they are to SMEs. And that's a different approach to leadership altogether that the industry needs to be sustainable going forward. And it is radical, but we're going to have to do and just get started on it. And if we don't, we are going to sort of push ourselves out of the industry. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for that. Lots and lots of learnings and notes that I'm making here. So a lot of what has been spoken about, and from a change agent perspective, will require the human capital specialists to also think differently. So I'm going to turn to my HR colleagues to say, we need to be the enablers of all of this, right? So let's talk career paths that has been mentioned. Let's delve deep into that a little bit. Let's talk dynamic job design, to Thokozile's point around, it's not just about mentoring and coaching post-retirement. How do we evolve the actual job description? How do we design jobs so that as people progress from an experience perspective, some of that starts to shift? Maybe let me come back to you, Tara and Snowy, if you can both just give me a sense of what our role as human capital specialists and leaders can be to help make this change.
Thanks, Anele. So I think having defined career paths is critically important, especially in a much larger organization. In a smaller organization like Simon's, I think there is a much wider span where a colleague would learn a lot versus in a corporate organization where there are specific tiers. Having those defined career paths in a big organization allows an employee to understand, where am I and where can I possibly be in a few years' time if I dedicate my time, if I join people in meetings, if I shadow, if I do what is necessary to absorb that skill set. And I think that is missing in certain areas of our organizations, especially in the corporate environment. That's very important, because if we don't do that and managers aren't encouraging colleagues to progress, people sit in the same role for 10 or 15 years. They look back and we are asking the environment, what's happened? Where are our talented people? But we haven't necessarily given that opportunity for people to progress. In a smaller environment, I think it's possibly a little bit easier, but that also requires you to have younger people and older people, more skilled people, so that you can have that learning. And that's not necessarily possible, as Simon has indicated to us previously. Snowy, comments from your side?
Thanks, Tara. I mean, this is such an interesting conversation, and I think when we talk about and Thokozile mentioned it, when we talk about the workforce and how it has changed, I think one of the things for me is, and really requires opening our minds and the evolution of how we do things is, I mean, we talk about vocational work, but we're all not talking about project-based work, right? If we really want to build skills. So this is a project, work on this project and then expand your knowledge. And then when there's another project, so the thing that we have is that I report to this manager, we forget that we impact the organization, right? Working for organization. And so how do we allow the movement? Yes, there is certain circumstances where, you know, you need to do your work, whatever. But if I have capacity, allow me the opportunity, because it's not the qualification, it's the on-the-job learning that will make the difference for us all. So project-based, the gig opportunities, right? That is there. I mean, we talk about gigging. Young people want to gig. That I want to go here and I want to do there, and you know, but we prevent that because we are not used to that, and we keep on saying they're entitled. You know, they want all sorts of things, but we have to think differently. We have to embrace our young people. And I think the other thing is that we are so stuck on, and speaking from an HR perspective, is that we are so stuck on role definitions and descriptions that actually our roles change so often. I mean, when I was employed, I was doing certain things, but I'm doing so many more things, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we, it's not about sticking to that role definition, because you know sometimes you say this is my job, I anything else, no, I'm not. But we have to embrace that. When we bring in, we need to say, you know, this is our organization and this is how we're going to evolve, and for you to benefit and leverage of what we have and learn, these are, the world is your oyster. So you know, we're going to expose you to a variety of things so that we are not stuck into this is my role, I'm in claims, I'm in this, whatever. Otherwise we are never going to build. And our reality is, in this insurance industry, our competitors have changed. It's no longer just us. We've got the telco environment, we've got banks, we've got so many that are playing in this space, that if we don't, they are going to take our piece that we have, because this pie is so small, you know. So we really need to open our minds and think about, you know, how we embrace and the roles that we have and how we develop. And I think lastly, learning is a continuous thing. You know, this thing that I'm a leader, I don't have to develop that's nonsense. We have to continuously develop ourselves, because there is just so much new. We need to read, we need to watch the news, we need to see what is happening, so that proactively things are changing. You know, my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So Simon, I want to come back to you, particularly just to add as to what Tara and Snowy were saying. How does this look like in a smaller business environment? The idea of, you know, job design, the idea of career pathing, what does it actually look like?
Yeah, I have to say, until Tara spoke and specifically mentioned SMEs, and I mean no disrespect to the HR professionals on the call here, but I was just thinking, you know, those terms are as far as you can possibly imagine from the way HR works in a small business. You know, career design. I mean, designed career paths. These are all. It's almost like jargon that has no meaning in the smaller environment. And please, I don't want to put myself out here as speaking on behalf of all SMEs, because I know everyone has its own unique properties. I have the challenge in our business is that we are specialist underwriters. So I need highly skilled people that have experience. You know, if I employed 100 people instead of there just being 9 of us, then I would say, right, how do I get the person that comes in at entry level from where they are to where they need to be, or where we need them to be in terms of skills? And I guess you could say a business with 100 people is certainly still an SME, you know, in the eyes of a big global broking firm like many of you work in. So I feel like the on the job training. Someone actually said in the chat here, you know, the huge value that is still attributed to on the job training. That, you know, that kind of supersedes in many ways the qualifications aspect. And I also just want to say this, and of course the world has changed dramatically in the last 30 years, especially in South Africa. But when I joined the industry back in 1990-ish, I say ish because I don't really want to give away the specific date. But when I joined the industry, there were very few people that had university qualifications. Most of the people that were in senior positions had sort of worked their way up to those roles. And are probably the average age of a manager, and please, I'm just kind of making assumptions here. And of course, when I was 20, anyone who was over the age of 30 was considered very old. But it appeared to me that the management were always much older people, like in their 50s or 60s even. So it was kind of ingrained into me that you had to spend a long time in the industry to get from, where you start to where you really want to end up retiring if you're going to stay in a corporate. And I think that many of us in my sort of age cohort still think like that. So when you get a sort of a bright person in your team, a young person, the temptation to say to them, look, you just need to wait your turn because, it took me 20 or 30 years to get to this point. That temptation is immense. And I think when it comes to the question that I saw on the group earlier was, should we really be fast tracking people to get to the point where they can give advice? And the answer is really no. There's way too much at stake. You're dealing with other people's lives, especially as a financial advisor. So you don't really want to cut corners, so to speak. But I do think there is still tremendous value in the lived experience, the shadowing. What we used to call it in the old days is you were kind of carrying your manager's briefcase or the big thing of files. I still think there's a lot of learning in there, and the younger generation often has very little patience for that. And that might also be, this might feed into another issue here that we can talk about, but the number of relatively junior people coming into the industry now that already have 2 or 3 degrees, like somebody coming in with a master's degree into a clerical role, of course they want to be fast-tracked. They didn't spend hundreds of thousands, millions on their education so that they could sit in those jobs for 5 or 10 years. So, and this is not an SME issue, actually. I know that's what you asked me to comment on, but I think that's across the spectrum. People that are actually overqualified for some of the jobs that they're in. What do I need in my business as an SME? I need someone who can hit the ground running and start producing almost immediately, because I don't have that sort of time horizon, where I can just, dig into a corporate bank account and fund a long-term project of getting someone up to speed. It is just a harsh reality of what it means to be, in the entrepreneurial space.
Sure. So challenges and opportunities abound. I think I do want to expand on, and Tara, I see your hand is up. I want to expand on the whole concept of, us telling younger people to wait your turn, because we do see that, that doesn't work. Then we lose young talent as well, which is another layer. So talking about retention of young talent in the industry, Kusha, I do want to come to you, please, on, and I'm throwing it out there. How does the regulatory environment, and can the regulatory environment help us with the retention of talent in the industry? And I think this is where the reimagining comes in, right? Because we are all role players. So a comment from you on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question to consider. And I mean, what I think is, I don't know that regulation can actively help, but I think there's things that regulation can do so as not to hinder the attraction and retention of young talent in the industry. So I spoke a bit earlier about regulatory burden and the requirements that may be put on financial service providers. I think it's been quite a clear aim of the FSCA since our establishment to be kind of streamlining and harmonizing our regulatory frameworks away from rules-based and fragmented and burdensome regulation to much more streamlined and harmonized and principles-based regulation. And I think that gives much more flexibility in terms of the requirements that are put on individuals participating in the sector, while still maintaining that level of customer protection that we want to see at the end of the day. And again, just back to the role that we want to play in relation to transformation. I think having a better understanding of what challenges may be experienced when it comes to things like skills development, like succession planning, et cetera, could also allow us, to provide that holistic view of what's happening and where resources could potentially be directed for best effect. So regulation maybe not explicitly supporting, but certainly making sure that it's not hindering the attraction of talent and the retention of young talent in the sector. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm looking at time. I do need to start with wrapping up of the discussion. I think we've had a really good discussion. And what I like is that there's some action items that are coming out of a panel discussion that we need to, to table and explore further. So I think just to wrap up, if we can wrap up with you, Thokozile, around particularly the work of the IISA being, that industry body that is helping us with challenges around skills. What role can the professional designations and the development plans play in addressing everything that has been spoken about today? And that's the way we're gonna wrap up and then take some questions from the floor.
Right. Can I start off by saying that, some of the problems that we're highlighting here, I think the root cause is lending in the profession unintentional, with lots of qualifications, what Simon mentioned, but with that mismatch. But I do feel that there is a solution, which I think many of us are not doing or do it in a different way. We don't communicate a career path for an individual when they join the industry. The role that they end up in, how does that look like progression-wise? Wherever you are, whether you are in claims, in underwriting, in risk management, that's not clearly articulated. So an individual is then left with not knowing what's next. And I think as an industry, we need to get to a point where we educate the young people that we attract to the industry that growth is not vertical and growth is not about title. Growth is about knowledge. And I mean, the beauty of working in small organizations like Simon's, and I've worked in a small organizations, is the ability to be cross-skilled, job rotation, and even big organizations can do that. You get to learn and understand the entire organization, how it fits into the industry, how the department fits into the organization, and ultimately how the organization fits into the industry into the economy. And that's very important. And touching on to the professional designations, a professional designation is critical in every industry. It elevates your standing in one element, but it also shows your intentional approach into lifelong learning. Because as a person with a designation, you've got to make sure that old knowledge, you don't hold on to it. You've got to continuously improve your knowledge, and that lifelong learning, a professional body, and assists you with identifying areas where you need to grow in your knowledge and not your vertical title growth. And that's a big shift as leadership we need to bring to the young people, that growth is not about being a team leader or being a manager. I know it's nice to be called a manager. It gives you some authority, but it's about the knowledge that can then transform one from one level to another. And it's important that we bring that in. What I also want to pull in is that from a professional development perspective and getting that designation, it's important that we start looking at mentorship and coaching differently. Mentorship is a lifelong relationship. It's not an event. It's not a start and finish event or relationship. I've got to be able, Zanele, to have a relationship with you that whenever I need to touch base with you, I can do that, but I can also disappear for 6 months and be talking to Simon or be talking to Kersha on other areas that I need. But then there's also a need for that structured coaching where we look at your technical skills, the technical know-hows, and be intentional about giving you a buddy that will help you in that journey. I'll pause there, but I can never overemphasize the importance of being an accredited professional to make sure that your relevance in the profession grows and keeps growing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Lots of insights, lots of nuggets. Brad, if I can come back to you, please. Do we have questions that have not been addressed? Because I know some of the questions have been addressed already from the chat. Is there anything that you're seeing there for any of our panelists?
Yes, thanks, Aurelia. Brilliant. I think, if the last 75 minutes have not left members feeling inspired, informed, and or relieved, then I'm not too sure what will. So as Zanele stated, we do have a few minutes left of our session, and we've received a few questions from members. In no particular order to panel members, there was a question just requesting the view of panel members on creating the right experience for interviewees when arriving for an interview. The expectation from applicants is to join a strong employer brand with benefits. So interested to hear panelists' thoughts on that.
Okay, anyone, please
Can you just
volunteer.
repeat that last part?
No problem. So the question was, what is the view from the panel on creating the right experience for interviewees when arriving for an interview? As the expectation from these applicants is to join a strong employer brand with benefits. So in other words, how does the employer approach an interview situation for a prospective employee? Simon, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, look, for me, it's kind of unique because for the first 5 minutes, I have to convince the applicant that I'm not actually Judge Dredd. They can take more than 5 minutes from time to time as well. But actually, and maybe this is useful to other people that have tuned in today, but I do find that I can't compete with corporate salaries generally. I can't compete with the designed career path, so to speak. But what I can guarantee, of course, is that you may be more at home in a boutique than in a supermarket. And I think that applies, even when you're at university. It's nice to be in a small class because you tend to get more focused. So that's kind of what I'm selling. I might not even be able to offer the employee benefits that some of our corporates can offer, but the flexibility and that one-on-one mentorship and coaching, I think we're in a better position to deliver it. So that would be how we would position ourselves as an SME. And if anyone's looking for a job, Simon at theliabilitycompany.com. Don't go corporate, go boutique.
You're gonna get a lot of CVs. I'm sure of that. Thanks, Simon. Thokozile.
For me, it's how you position your employee value proposition and what I highlighted as that career path. So how you position what you offer as an organization from a development perspective and your intentional investment is very critical. I think most of the young people come in with wanting titles and communicating in our organization. This is our value proposition, and this is how the career path looks. I thought would be what would work.
Thank you. Snowy, you also want to give this one a shot?
Yeah, I mean, and we've experienced this, and I mean, I can even speak from when we interview learners and interns. I really think it's about making individuals welcome. I think it's such a big thing, right? It's welcoming people, whether we're going to take you or not. And the big thing, and I know it's a lot of work. The big thing with bringing in individuals is that we never actually take time to give feedback. there's a gap in terms of, because if we're saying we're building, we don't give feedback. So I go back to the next organization, I make the same mistake, and then I wonder why I'm not getting a job. There is somewhere where we need to work around that we need to give some sort of feedback and guidance. How we dress, there's a level of etiquette that is there, and sometimes we just don't say it. So I do think it's how we welcome. It's big, and we are all biased, right? So we want little snowies to work with little snowies, and we're not opening our minds. So it's really something that we need to think about, and you need to have a different view. Different views is what build businesses from who you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad, do we have an
Great.
opportunity for one more, perhaps?
Thanks, Aledi. Yeah, I think we'll just sneak in one question that I think that I believe absolutely has been touched on and alluded to and unpacked a bit during the session. But I think a final statement, if that, from members would be great. The question is, do you think enough has been done to make young people aware of the opportunities in the insurance field, i.e., insurance can be sexy? How do we translate and communicate that to the future pipeline of employees? So final thoughts on that.
Great, thanks. Let that be the final thoughts. Thokozile?
Thank you. I'll be quick. So we are intentionally, as a professional body in partnership with various corporate partners of ours, we go to high schools and educate them about the profession in insurance, how you can venture into it, the various roles in insurance, and what you can embark on. So that we do on an ongoing basis. Is it enough? Not. Is it at a point where individuals are joining the industry intentionally? Not yet. What we also do, we offer, with funding from the industry and funding from the CETA, we offer bursaries to high schools, the top 5, the top 3, and we put them through an NQF level 5 training, and with the view of progression. Once they complete, they can then be absorbed. So those are one of the initiatives we are doing. It is early days to start seeing its impact, but there's definitely that awareness that is being done.
Great, thank you for that. Tara?
So we are fortunate because we have the opportunity to go to career fairs and present as a corporate. So I think that is one way that the larger organizations have an opportunity to expose young people to the insurance industry. It gives them a little bit of a taste, and whether those young people join an Aon, a Marsh, or a smaller organization, I think that's very critical to get in front of those youngsters as they're finishing their qualifications, because a lot of them don't understand, that is a career path that they can follow. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Simon, closing comment?
Yeah, this is going to come across as another shameless plug, but I just wanted to say the Insurance Apprentice has been running for 10 years, and this year it's been picked up by one of the national TV networks. So in June, July this year, we'll have 7 weeks very much in the public eye. And our sponsors, task setters, everyone that's been involved with this production has seen it as an opportunity to lift the curtain on what actually goes on in our industry. And we've all had in the back of our minds during this season that what we really want to do is attract people into our businesses and let them see that not that there's anything wrong with motor insurance, but that very small window that you see on television doesn't even capture 1% of what we do in the industry. So yeah, I think that is a way that we can attract people. I can't say that I'm personally going to be involved in making it sexy, but I would certainly like people to think that there's some great opportunities, and of course to encourage the industry to keep supporting it. Thank you.
Awesome. No issue at all with that plug. Thanks. So closing comments, Kersha and Snowy, and then Brad, I'll hand back to you to thank our members and close out.
Thanks. Yeah, one of the comments that struck me in the chat was asking where is the presence of some of the other industry associations, and this is not something that FIA can necessarily address all on its own. And I did just want to stress the importance of working kind of collaboratively, leveraging the different insights that may exist in different parts of the sector, but with the aim of kind of drawing towards a cohesive ultimate end goal, which is to make sure that the industry remains sustainable, remains a great creator for employment opportunities in the country, and allows for successful career progression as people enter. Thanks very much for today's discussion.
Thank you, Kosha. Snowy, final comment.
So thank you. I think for me, it's about what is it that we're doing next, and we need to do the work. That's so important. But I think my last comment is that as we're on this call, we're all accountable and responsible to make a change. It is not going to take the FSCA or FIA or big organizations in the industry. We need to do the work. Small changes will really impact individuals. So for me, that's what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. I could not have said it better. Thank you to the FIA. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. It was a very insightful discussion. Brad, over to you to close.
Thanks, Anele. Yeah, unfortunately, that's all we have time for this morning. For the questions that we were unable to answer, we shall share those with our panel members and revert with feedback shortly after the webinar. And again, yeah, to Zanele and the panel members, thank you for taking time away from your respective businesses. I think that your insights today prove that while we may be in the business of managing risks and other people's risk, we actually aren't afraid to take bold steps towards a sustainable future. See what I did there? In other words, I really believe that insurance brokers can be revolutionaries. So from the FIA team, thanks to Lani for working his magic from the IT side, as well as for Sandra for assisting with the coordination. Thanks, members. Thanks, Anila. Have a super Friday, everyone.